Hello and welcome to the no, not the morning sports briefing. Where are we? No, it's 8 p.m. at night. It's not morning at all. It's the DrivingMaul show here on New Zealand Sports Radio. That's right, 8 p.m. every Tuesday evening is your weekly fix of rugby. What are we going to be talking about this week? Well, there's Super Rugby just a couple of weeks away, and we have some cool stats to share with you. So we'll have a talk about that. There's a couple of news items that we'll cover off on. And then there's some small matter of some rugby that actually happened last weekend. So we might have to talk a bit about that. That's what happened in Europe. But yeah, we'll see. Yes, I'm sure that that'll just take a couple of seconds to get through because nothing really important happened up there in the Six Nations, as you can probably tell. So joining me this evening to talk about all this kind of stuff. We have Boa. How are you doing, sir?
Hello, Boa. Very well. Well, what can I say? Historic weekend. You there, Paul?
Absolutely. Historic weekend because I got to interview Tupu Vai, the All Black, for the first time. So clearly, yes, historic weekend for that reason. And we'll have a look at those interviews as well as in the build-up to Super Rugby.
I was more alluding to the fact that Scotland managed to finally. Well, you have to be fair to Scotland. Once a season, they have a good game. Once a season, it just so happened to be at Twickenham, 38 years after their last won a game against England. So, yeah, what can I say? I hope everyone is well, and I hope everyone is safe. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bert. And also joining us is Stephen Harris. How are you doing, sir?
Very good, thank you, Paul, and good evening to you. Always a privilege and a pleasure to be on the TDM, and good morning to those viewers in Durban in South Africa, because it's 9 a.m. It is the morning in South Africa, and over in London it's just after 7. So good morning to those viewers who are tuning in their droves to the TDM.
There you go. Yes, so it is a good morning somewhere in the world, and it's also it's after 5 p.m. somewhere in the world as well, so I can have a beer as well. So we're all good. All good here. So look, let's clearly the Six Nations is the big news of the weekend. So let's kick off there with that one. I'll be honest, I haven't seen France versus Italy. It was A, it was in the middle of the night, and B, I was had to drive up to Auckland to cover the Super Smash. So I didn't get up for that one because it was just too early. And I would have been dangerous driving. So, boys, did you watch France versus Italy at all? Either of you?
Yeah, I did. I in fact watched all the games this weekend. I have to say a massive question mark over the involvement of Italy. Competing at this level, they're pretty abysmal. I mean, they haven't won a game since 2015. And the atrocious form was just compounded. France were just far too good, 10 tries, and really Italy looked like they were lost. They were kind of like the bully in the schoolyard, or the one getting bullied by the big bully at the schoolyard. And France just turned up, did their thing. So you can't really read too much into that form line because it was a thoroughbred racehorse against a V8 race car, and we know who's always going to win. But there was some sublime touches from a few of the French players, namely Dupont, this beautiful little no-look flick back blind pass, and they're a good team, France, no question about it. But I'd like to reserve my judgment on how they go against the better teams, and Italy, they certainly don't belong in the Six Nations or any nations playing Test rugby at the moment.
Ouch! Whoa! Look, they've beaten. Since you brought it up, let's get straight into this one of Georgia should replace Italy rubbish. Italy have beaten Georgia recently when they played. Georgia have never been beaten a Tier 1 nation. I mean, there really isn't another team that's demanding a place to replace Italy. So you either go down to 5 nations, or you or you plead Italy. I think
that is precisely what I'm saying. I think it's got to go back to the 5 nations. And just having another Six Nation, Italy, Georgia, or whoever, it's just it's making up the numbers, and it's making a mockery of the competitive nature of it. So I think it's just got to go back to the Five Nations.
Yeah, guys, dare I say it, even the Western Force and the Melbourne Rebels in Super Rugby, even when they were struggling, they actually managed to win some games, and obviously every now and again tip up a team. Yeah, I don't know. Like Paul said, if George is the answer, they probably aren't. But at the moment, a team that's not the answer are the Italians. I mean, say, if you think about it, the French without Intermac, their star first five not playing, and a couple of others in the forwards not available. And really and truthfully, this game was well and truly over even before halftime, 24-3 at halftime, and of course 45-3 with 22 minutes to go. It's arguable that the French took the foot off the accelerator, and it must be concerning for those who actually run the game in the Northern Hemisphere that they've actually got a team that, let's face it, is a dud, an out and out dud, that's actually playing in this Six Nations Championship. Yep, sure, they might bring a bit of money in, rebroadcasting wise, and of course we want to see the Italians' growth, but boy, we need a heck of a lot more help for those guys that they're getting at the minute. And when you consider they've actually got, it's not as if they haven't got any professional teams running around. They've got a couple of professional teams, but boy, where are they getting it wrong?
Both those professional teams, to be fair, are struggling this year. I think COVID hasn't helped them from that point of view. Obviously, Italy, north of Italy in particular, was the first epicenter of COVID in Europe. So I think that probably hasn't helped them. I'm going to throw some stats at you guys to counter what you're saying here. I mean, Simon Hughes in the live chat says disagree with Boa on this one, and I'm guessing, and I guess look, there's got to be a pathway to trying to grow the game. We can't be going backwards to the Five Nations is definitely one part of it. But some stats said Italy ran the ball for 510 meters to 484 for France. They ran it more than France did. They had 9 clean breaks to 14. That's pretty. That sounds like that they had some play in this one. But at the end of the day, the thing that probably let them down, they had more possession, they had more territory. What probably let them down with two things. One is a 76% tackle rate compared to 89 by France, and the 12-9 penalty ratio. That perhaps it was more defence than attack, and they do have some. With 9 clean breaks, when we look at the stats for the England-Scotland game, that's been way more than England achieved. So do they actually have something going on there or not? Did you see anything, guys?
Look again. Those statistics, all they do are just papering over the obvious cracks, and the obvious. There's 2 elements to where Italy have got it wrong. Number one is their talent acquisition and recruitment. They're going to have to look at importing players because locally they don't have the talent to foot it with the top tier teams. So they have to go down the route which clearly Scotland and Ireland were the architects of this, bringing in players from other top tier nations or the Pacific Islands on the residency method and get them into their senior structures. Otherwise, all it's going to do is with their homegrown talent pool, they're just going to fall further and further down the pecking order. And of course, the other element of it is their tactical ability to finish with. So if you have more line breaks than France, the question then has to be asked: why didn't they score more tries? Well,
no, sorry.
The finishing, the tactical.
France had 14 line breaks. Italy had 9. So Italy had less line breaks, but still 9 line breaks for 1 try. Not a good conversion rate. You're quite right.
Guys, I was going to say under Nick Mallett, I remember when Nick Mallett was actually coaching them, and he played a style that pretty much, what would you call it, damage control, where they played quite a tight game without too much ball movement, a lot of kicking. Listen, a lot of endeavour in the way that they're trying to play. I'll give them that. But on the same token, you've got to have some real world-class players to able to achieve that. And we'll get on to a team shortly who hasn't got a lot of world-class players in their back line, but they also know their limitations in terms of the way that they play the game. I don't think Italy's quite found the right recipe in terms of how they want to actually play the game, because sometimes when you're playing against a team like France, I think this is where a little bit of tactics comes into it as well. With the French, I think you need to play the ball in behind their forwards, in behind their backs, and force them to play a lot of rugby out of their 22. Problem for Italy, when they turn ball over with all their endeavour, that's when they get stung. They got stung a lot of times on turnover ball, and it's just really not having that real high class skill or X factor. One real quality player that stands out, that can other players can rally around them. It's a shame for them. I'd rather see them being competitive at the moment, but at the moment I'm seeing no change. It's sort of like, what's that first sign of madness? You're watching the same thing and nothing's changing. That's what I'm watching. Whatever Paul
and also real lack of leadership, I think, after
whatever Paul was saying, it must have been really interesting.
After Sergio Parise was probably.
Look, we'll move. Yes, so I've muted myself again. I got some traffic noise that I'm trying to keep off the broadcast, folks. So I keep remember to turn my mute back on. But yeah, look, we've. I'm not sure we're going to bring any more insight into the Italy-France game, so we'll move on. But you're right there. Again, 12 turnovers, Stephen, by Italy. If you're going to turn out, if you're going to give broken field play to the opposition like France, you're going to get thumped. Okay, then. The game that will only take a couple of seconds, obviously, to talk about is England versus Scotland. Now we can just breeze over this one. Now, look, in all seriousness, congratulations to Scotland beating England 11-6 at Twickenham. None of the players in the match day 23 were alive the last time Scotland won at Twickenham. As Boa said, it was a historic weekend. These wins are as rare as hen's teeth. So congratulations, Scotland. And they deserved the win. So before we go off and you'll hear me talk about all sorts of stuff, let's bear in mind, whatever I say from now on, I've already said Scotland deserved the win. And Stephen, I guess this is the team we're talking about with Scotland here. Not got a plethora of world-class players, but know how to get the best out of the players they've got.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, so you kind of look at their backs. Well, really, in terms of world class, what Finn Russell and of course Stuart Hogg, just showing what a world class player he is. And the thing I do like about Hogg, he weighs up situations really, really quickly. He knows when he's isolated, knows when he needs to kick, and he's a real competitor. We saw him had that real odd game last year where he made a couple of mistakes in a game that you'd never see in the month of Sunday, but he is absolutely all class. And I've got to say, the other area that surprised me was the Scottish scrum. The Scottish scrum really stood up, and they also showed they had a little bit of depth off the bench in that area as well.
Here we go. I'm going into excuse mode now. If we look at the England pack, both first choice props were missing, as was the second choice loose head. We also were missing the one of the first choice locks and the first choice 7 as well. Add into that the 2, 4, and 8 also haven't played any rugby because they're Saracens players. So 3 out of the 4 players who are starters for that pack have not played any rugby recently because of what's happened with Saracens. So look, England's pack was not at its best by any stretch of the imagination. Yes, Scotland, you can only play the team that turns up on the day, but they're going to come across much stronger challenges going forwards. In that one. But yeah, you're right. They did well up front. But
well, I first of all I have to say I did tip you guys week before, long shot Scotland, and that was a very, very long shot. 38 years since they last beat England at headquarters in Twickenham. But what I liked about Scotland was they were picking a squad, and you got to give credit to Gregor Townsend. He picked a squad of guys who had good, solid run-on form from the European competitions. And of course, I did mention, watch out for the big South African, Dwan van der Merwe. And it was good odds actually for him to score a try, and he scored the only try. And for me, the biggest difference in that game was the amount of carry meters some of the key ball players made. Now, guys like Stuart Hogg had 62 carry meters. Finn Russell, 34 carry meters, and about 340 kick meters, as in kicking the ball out of his hand. Brilliant tactical kicking. You compare that to the English number 8, Billy Wonipola, he only had 6 carry meters. He was a passenger. And that is a direct result of picking guys on reputation and not on form. And I was listening to Eddie Jones post-game, one of the press conferences. He came out and said, look, I take total responsibility. And he has to, because those sort of tactics, we've seen this happen many a time in international sport. You go pick players on reputation as opposed to run on form, and you pay a very heavy price. And I have to say, England looked, awful. They were absolutely abysmal. And the real sticking point for me was the tackle technique. There were a number of times we could see the white shirts going, chest, shoulder height, and just not even laying a finger on the Scots, whereas the Scots, they got nice and low and they went nice and hard into that breadbasket target zone. So you could really see the difference in intensity. And I have to say, it's very unfair when you pick players who are unprepared for test footy. You can't expect people not to play any sort of competitive rugby and all of a sudden throw a shirt, a test shirt, and say, come on, son, let's play a Calcutta Cup. It doesn't work that way anymore. So all credit to Scotland. I wish I'd put a little bit more money on Scotland. But I think, Scotland turn up once a season, and this might be that once a season. But long it may continue.
See, Stephen's now muted himself, you see, and it's he's doing the same thing I did.
Sorry about that, guys. Might have a bit of noise in the background as well, but it wasn't cars. I was going to say, it highlights to me how much work has gone into that English defensive game. Maybe they're kind of overthinking it here, as opposed to you kind of looked at a couple of opportunities in the backs where, somebody like Elliot Daly, why you wouldn't be getting somebody like Elliot Daly in space or into the game, or getting Johnny May, who unfortunately for Johnny had a poor game with his hands under the high ball. But there were times the midfield, and obviously there was a new guy, Lawrence, coming in. So there were times they looked like they met in the car park, for crying out loud, as opposed to just getting their basics right, because they have got some good ball carriers if they can get it right. Of course, Paul made the point about having a personnel missing, and yeah, we take that point on board, but we also know the depth that Eddie Jones has created with this England squad. On another given day, it's crazy to think that at the end of the day, they were. You could arguably say they were well beaten, but they were still in that contest with 5 minutes to go. In fact, I actually thought, watching it, I thought Scotland would actually find a way to lose that game, and they almost did. Gave them that opportunity.
They almost,
as you said, but possession 65%, Scotland, territory 70%. Yeah, Scotland dominated this game from that point of view. England, I think part of Bo. There's a few stats I want to pull out around some of the things you guys have said. Bo mentioning about the tackle technique of England. England missed 29 tackles out of their 190. Now, one of the stats that people that I've heard say before is that it's the number of missed tackles, not the percentage of missed tackles, that makes the difference. England missed 29. Scotland only missed 11, which is a big difference there, almost twice as much. Again, talking about those wide players. Now I've got different stats to Boa, so I've actually got 0 meters for Billy Vunipola, not 3. So your stats are probably more accurate and more generous than mine. But you're quite right. Anthony Watson, 3 runs during the game. The first one was an hour into the game. Ollie Lawrence had 1 run during that game, and you're looking at Johnny May had 6. Compare that to players like Hogg or Russell, 7 runs there. Hogg with 13 runs during that game, getting it into the hands of their dangerous players. Whilst Elliot Daly has 12 runs, they were all kick returns, basically running into a good kick chase line. I think that's one of the things I spotted there, was that Scotland's kick chase line was a lot better than England's. England had one guy or two guys basically herring out, trying to get the ball, the catcher, whereas Scotland came up in a line, and I think that was a big difference in some of those breaks as well.
So a really good example of chalk and cheese is Anthony Watson. His first carry was actually from behind their own goal line, and in under absolute pressure. Whereas Van der Merwe, his first major touch was 15 meters out, on the outside, good space. He just barnstormed over 3 English defenders, and it was very poor tackle technique. So 3 missed tackles there. He scores a try, and also I have to say,
sorry, that was his second touch. His first touch was a crossfield kick, which into the into the try area, which he nearly scored from as well, but wasn't quite executed right. So, but your point counts.
Oh, I stand corrected, and thank you for that, Paul. And of course the other side, as Stephen rightly mentioned, I mean, England had plenty of chances to kind of steal the win, because Scotland, for all that possession, in the first 18 minutes there were 7 penalties, and they declined a number of shots at goal, despite having Finn Russell, as their goal kicker, and also some of the tactics they used, they really sent out the invitation to England to come right back into it, because they went back into that old Scotland casual mode for large chunks, for large periods of play, and of course, no game is ever complete without highlighting where the referee could have been a lot better. And there were a number of times where Andrew Brace went up to England and said, look, you got to stop infringing. I'm going to pull up the card. In fact, he had that conversation 4 times. So, England were very lucky only to have 1 card in the whole game. And, professional fouling is starting to again creep into the game. And unfortunately, the referee...
When did it leave? The All Blacks are masters at this, of giving up 3s rather than 5s.
What I'm saying is, as far as this competition goes, first week itself, we're starting penalty after penalty, blatant sort of not rolling away, the very basic stuff, and it sort of contributed into making the game a little bit messy, and that presented England with enough opportunities, but again, they just couldn't take it. So. We have to really question some of those tactics and some of those selections. And for me, the most underlying factor is that, you have to pick guys on form. You can't pick people on reputation. It's just not going to work, as we found out last weekend.
Yeah, and selection is the other one I want to talk about, is the style for Eddie Jones. Under Eddie Jones, England have played well when you've had a forward Farrell axis with either Jamie Joseph or Henry Slade outside them, essentially. And when they've tried to have Tio, or in this case, Ollie Lawrence, and before that, Luther Burrell, it's not really kind of worked. And so every tournament, he goes in trying to think, okay, right, I can move on from this forward Farrell thing, and I'll bring Farrell into 10, and I'll bring Ford off the bench as a kind of game changer towards the end. And 2 or 3 games in, we always see Ford starting again. And going back to that that system, with Ford coming off with about 20 minutes to go, and then you bring on your heavy runner. He doesn't seem to have learned that I know he's trying to change things up. He did, talking about the defensive piece, he did say last year was about getting their defense right, and then after that he was then going to build attack on top of that. And yeah, England might have missed a lot of tackles, but there's a lot of scramble defense there that saved tries as well. But yeah, you've got to say that England got a long way to go, and from this, you can give whatever mitigating things around player availability, but every team has injuries, and you've just got to play with those and play with the players you've got, and a bit of a problem really. There we go.
Well, there is a bit of a dilemma, especially with sorry, Steve, just gonna add this with the Saracens, relegation. That this is gonna cause a bit of a dilemma for Eddie Jones and how he picks players. So he'll have to go back to his blueprint of wider training squad and actually start looking at players who are showing form, playing in the top competition, and start blooding them into the setup so that they do get some experience, they do get some run-on form, so that he could build on towards 2023 World Cup.
I was about to say, guys, one area, if you think of a lot of the midfielders that we've seen from England, Tuolangi, Burrell, they've gone down the road of having big, muscular type midfield backs, but I think one area where they do lack is just having somebody who's really creative. Because I mean to say, I shake my head that you've got the likes of Watson, Daly, and May out wide. I mean to say that's like having a Porsche in the garage and basically not having the keys to ignition to fire those guys out of the driveway. They just need somebody who's creative in that second five, and maybe you actually stick with Ford and Slade as your creative guys in the midfield, and just let them get more games under their belt.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look at. I did hear that the what is called, just to be nice and confusing, what's called the Rugby Championship, or that's not the Southern Hemisphere International Competition. That's the Tier 2 British rugby competition, has actually got dates and a schedule lined up. So Saracens will be getting some games. I'm just not. I just can't put my hand on the actual schedule at its moment, and obviously that's going to come too late for the Six Nations in game time for the players. And look, so there was a comment in here, unless you're Argentina. Absolutely. Now, Argentina, though, trained as a squad for pretty much 6 months. England have not been doing that. There's a big difference with not playing and then turning up and playing Test rugby between the two of them. We need to move on then to Ireland versus Wales. Also, Wales versus Ireland. Sorry, it was in Cardiff in this one. And another upset and another loss for me at the TAB. Wales taking this one out 21-16. Influenced by an early red card to Peter O'Mahony. Boa, if I let you go on this one, it's not going to be the referee going to complain about here, is it? It's going to be the player.
No, it should have been red for stupidity. But again, what I have to say is, I mean, if you look at that entire incident, the reason why Peter Mahoney went in to clear out the Welsh defender, because he was literally sitting on top of the tackle player, not rolling away, and then Mahoney follows through. Absolutely no excuses. You know, he tries that whole chicken wing elbow forearm technique to the head, and under the current high tackle framework, absolutely dead set red card. But what I have to say
before we go any further, now as the actual incident happened, Wayne Barnes said there was nothing else he could do, i.e., look, if the player puts himself in that situation and has to be cleared out, i.e., should have rolled away, then you can clear him out. But the thing that O'Mahony did wrong was put the elbow away from his body into the guy's head. If he'd kept it next to him and tried to wrap and taken the guy out head and all, he'd have got away with that one, I think.
No, it still is a red card under the current high tackle and player safety framework. Any sort of contact, if there's nothing mitigating, the onus is on the player entering into the contact. There was an interesting tweet by Nigel Owen. He actually said the player or the victim at the end of the contact, those circumstances have nothing to do with the sanction, which I think is incredibly stupid and ridiculous of World Rugby. And again, this draws light onto the limitations of the high tackle framework and this head-high contact situation.
This isn't a tackle. This is a clear out. It doesn't fall under the high tackle framework. This is a different situation.
Yeah, correct. But this is to do with contact. So entering into any form of contact, be it a maul, a ruck, where there is direct contact to the head of your opponent, there's a framework they go through. If there's nothing mitigating, it's a straight red card. So again, in this instance, the Welsh player was making no attempt to get out of the way. Mahoney got a little bit clumsy and then followed through with his elbow in that whole chicken wing. And you're right, Paul. Initially, Wayne Barnes much like he did in the quarterfinal where he missed that forward pass. Initially, he didn't see any of that, and then the DMO had to interject, and then we go through this whole shebang. So red card for stupidity, but it was a fatal blow to Ireland. It had a direct outcome on how the game would finish, and this is why, with my safe tackle framework, I advocate for an orange card. Now, that would be the perfect example where you go 10 minutes into the bin. It's a mandatory judicial hearing. If there's a further case to answer, let the judiciary sort it out, but don't kill the game. Leave the red cards for the outright foul play.
Well, okay, so you say, look, it's a red card unless there's mitigation. Now, Wayne Barnes was suggesting the mitigation was the player was, as you say, sitting on, not getting out of the way, and only presented his head as a target. So therefore, as far as Wayne Barnes was concerned, there was mitigation. The only reason it became rare, he saw it as a card was because the arm came away from the body and it was deliberate to the head. So, and also, if you look at, whenever we go for a try, there are players diving head first at the line to score a try. There's nothing else there to stop you, to aim for, to stop the player, other than the head, really, because it's head leading the way. So, and there is definitely some sort of mitigation around that, or there is, rightly or wrongly, mitigation around that kind of space that's allowed, because what else do you do, basically, as a defender? We haven't actually figured out how to play the game properly in that area, whether we go down the route of the NFL, where you just have to get the ball over the line in the air, and that way players don't have to dive with their head towards the ground. Maybe we head that way. But at the moment, there are still parts of the game where the safe tackle framework might exist, but it doesn't actually really get enforced because there's so much mitigation involved.
Well, we had a similar incident with Tyrell Lomax. It was actually worse, but he only got away with a yellow card. So again, this highlights the inconsistency. And if you have a good lawyer, Peter Mahoney can get off this charge quite easily, because I have a very good insight into how these judiciaries work, and depending on what time of the day and what the weather is like and who the QC or President's Council or whatever it is, depending on the locality, it's very inconsistent. So again, I feel for Peter Mahoney. I don't think he's a dirty player at all. It was just clumsy raising that. But then again, I feel that the worst player, if he's putting himself in a ridiculous situation like that, he deserves to be taken out. It's just unfortunate that shoulder, the elbow came up and that whole chicken wing motion came in, and out comes the red card.
A key thing also for your judiciary hearing, take good biscuits, apparently. So biscuits are important. People might get that reference a number of years ago. The biscuits were actually mentioned as part of the ruling of one of the judiciary committees.
Royal Dansk and English breakfast tea. There you go. What can I say? Sorry, Stephen.
Yeah, anything about the card, because we need to talk about the rest of the game at some point.
No, there's no worries, Paul. I think you pretty much covered everything, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I've got no issue. So it was a red card all day, every day of the week. But did I hear during the commentary that they did say he'd actually been suspended for something similar in a club game, guys? So it wasn't as if this was the first time for Peter Mahoney.
He is, I'm not sure if I didn't hear that, but he is definitely a player that's considered someone that is annoying around the field. So yes, it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, he's definitely one of those players that is a bit like Mario Toji. Mario Toji, another, is a wonderful player, but he also is, as the Blood and Mud Rugby podcast would say, gets involved in shithousery. He gets involved in holding people's ankles, and all the dark arts, as they say. And Amani's one of those. So
if you Google the name Peter Mahoney, I mean, he is named after I don't know if there's any coincidence, a very infamous gangster. So there you go.
Well, he definitely plays on the edge. But I've got to say, guys, that red card, it seems to instill a bit of some real lift in that Irish team, and they played some really, really good rugby in that first half, and they probably almost bemoaned the fact that maybe the half came to an end, because I thought they played some really good code, and I thought the try that they scored was brilliant. Just the change of direction. One of the midfielders making a break, was that Henderson or Ringrose who made the break. Found the open side flanker, and of course the big lock Ted Byrne picked and went. But if you actually watch that, he almost knocked it forward from the actual pickup. It actually bobbled a little bit, but fortunately kept control. But I thought it was a really good try, and to me the Irish were well worth it. So there must have been some real concerns for Wayne Pivac leading into that halftime break.
Well, the biggest beneficiary out of it all was Wayne Pivac. He gets a win, wins a win. But, I'm talking to most of my colleagues very close in Welsh rugby. Their take on it was that this was only going to paper over the very obvious cracks, and it's only a matter of time. And he was given a bit of a reprieve and a stay on possibly an execution. But you're right, Stephen. Ireland played some tremendous rugby straight after that, and it was purely the
looks like
ongoing physical toll, and the numbers eventually told. But yeah, I thought they actually.
Okay, so it looks like Boa's Wi-Fi is cutting in and out a bit, unfortunately, with us there. But you got as you say, sometimes a red card makes a team. Galvanizes a team, doesn't it? And hopefully we'll get Boa back. And that definitely did that in the first half, Ryland. But look, over the full 80 minutes, it told in the end. This was an important game for Wayne Pivac. Look, there's a break in his contract this summer. And if he doesn't come out of this Six Nations with a couple of good wins, then he is basically going to lose his job. Is how it's the situation. So that's he definitely needed the win.
Paul, I was about to say there was some real good leading up to that try. James Lowe with a really great clearing big left foot. We know what a big booming boot that he's got, and of course the line out turnover, the change of direction. So there was some nice little things that happened in the lead up to that try. And I noticed Ireland in the first half they actually used James Lowe off his wing. Quite a bit. Just seems to be finding his feet at that level of rugby. It wasn't perfect by any means as we get to the Welsh first try that was scored by George North.
Yeah, and George North, folks, playing at centre with the in the 13 jersey, so not on the wing. Interesting one there. You got Rhys Zammit. And Helen Amos are two guys that basically, Rhys Zammit is basically becoming cementing themselves in there. Actually, I've forgotten who the Welsh try scorer who was doing so well at the Rugby World Cup is injured, unfortunately. So they are missing a player there. But interesting to see George North coming in. Perhaps, as he's getting older. Geez, I mean, he might be nearly 30 now. He might be slowing down a bit, and therefore, bringing him in a space. Is not a bad idea at all. But you talk about James Lowe, 15 carries, 116 meters. And we look at, but we can. I mean, I talked about those numbers of carries before. We look at a very different style here from Ireland. 19 carries for Henshaw, 14 for Ringrose. They're much more a ball in hand side, aren't they? It's interesting how they're very different to England and Scotland, who both didn't want to play in their half. And we're going to play once it was in the right area. Thank you, Nocturnal Rights. Josh Adams is the player that I was couldn't get the name of. It's interesting that Ireland got a very distinct style to England and Scotland at the moment, and also Wales, arguably. So it's good to see that different styles of rugby can still win. Well, actually, Ireland didn't win, but can still be played. That's one thing I love about the sport.
Yeah, Paul, I think with Wales, if you look at their attacking patterns, and with George North coming into the midfield, I think we're going to see more and more of him. In fact, he might be a permanent fixture there, and this is to make room for Zammit, the young flyer in the wing, because I think he's definitely going to be a long-term project and a long-term prospect. He's going to be, he's going to turn into a real star. He's got some real gas and wheels on the outside. And of course, the Welsh attacking pattern, they've gone back by using guys like George North in the midfield. They've gone very much back to a beefy midfield bust. If you recall, early 2000s with guys like Scott Gibbs. And it was a very effective style which worked for Wales. So I think Wayne Pivac has actually taken a cue from that. He's cut out all the frills and all the all the fancy stuff, and they're just trying to play a very basic type of rugby. And it worked. Of course, Peter Mahoney's red card really did help. But with the amount of run meters and the amount of carry meters Ireland did, Wales did, even with a one-man advantage to hang on well for it. So it'll be very interesting to see how this Wales side evolves in this competition. And George North, I feel, will have a huge influence, especially with their line busts. And if they can find some players who can tag along and support those line busts, it's going to be a fairly interesting turnaround for Wales, and more so for Wayne Pivac. So let's wait and see.
Yeah, next up then, folks, England versus Italy. So England should get an easy win there, even with players who haven't played any rugby. Scotland play Wales up in Murrayfield, so that'll be an interesting one. Obviously, no crowds, but still, Scotland at home in that one. And Scotland have historically been really strong at home and struggled to travel. We didn't see that so much last weekend, but the rain also in the second half. Though my Australian friends will understand how it's easy to lose to Scotland in the rain. So Scotland Wales will be an interesting one, and then finally. It's green versus blue. Ireland hosting France in the next round. So, boy, oh boy, it doesn't get any easier for Ireland. Let's be honest. The other two, I would say, I'll be writing my predictions, but England will go in obviously as heavy favourites. If you can find any bookmaker that'll take money on England, I'll be amazed. Scotland after that performance, wow, against a Welsh team that's been struggling recently. I would be personally backing Scotland. I don't know about you boys. And then you got to. It's hard to look past France at the moment. I think they are at the moment looking good for the title, for my mind.
France certainly the one to beat. I think Scotland they will certainly improve from last week and coming back to Murrayfield. I'm expecting Scotland to take a lot more shots at goal this time. They'll be playing a lot more conservative rugby against Wales. Be interesting to see how Wales back up. Yeah, but England versus Italy, I mean, you can't ask for a better week to back up after a painstaking loss. So it's funny how things work out for them. But I'm expecting England to come and breathe fire, and Italy will probably just wilt into the thin air.
I'm going to go for Ireland in an upset over France. The Irish, even though they went down, they showed enough to me. They showed enough against Wales to take down France, in my opinion. So I'm going to go for the Emerald Green to cause the upset of the round.
Well, there you go. Moving on then, folks. We'll try and remember to rub Stephen's face on my face in it after next week, depending on which way that one goes. Just some quick rugby news then. Neil Barnes is going to be the new head coach of Taranaki Rugby. Do you think that is a good appointment, Stephen?
Yeah, I do actually. It's well known that Taranaki have had their issues. Of course, Woody Rickard's moving on what's been a very sort of unsuccessful campaign. When you given the quality of their squad, and they've had quality, but they've also had a lot of injuries as well. In fact, the whole union has been through a little bit of a tough time not being able to use their facility there, Gary Stadium, which needs a whole lot of work to get up and running again. But no, good to see Neil Barnes, of course, part of the Chiefs as well. So he brings definitely a little bit more higher level of experience, and hopefully will bring a bit of sanity back to that union.
Yeah, I'd have liked Willie to stay on as an assistant coach. He's a very, very young coach, still learning his trade. Perhaps promoted a little bit too quickly when I've gone blank as to the the Taranaki coach who moved on to the Chiefs and was head of the Chiefs for a while.
Colin Cooper.
Colin Cooper, thank you. I want to say Collins. I'm close, but I'm not close enough. Perhaps coming after Colin Cooper had such a successful run with Taranaki. I think was always on to a bit of a tough team there. So hopefully he will find a coaching job, because he's a very young guy. Bella?
Yeah, no question. And I think, look, it's been very tumultuous times down in the Naki, and appointing someone like Neil, I think it's tremendous, because at that level, especially at NPC, where you're drawing from a talent pool from the respective provinces, club premier grade players, you really need an old school taskmaster. You need someone who can really cut down the trainings into the nitty gritty, the real basics. Just keep it simple, and get some passion back into the players so that they turn up week in, week out, and they do their jam. So I think it's definitely the right move, and there's a lot of experience there. So I'm actually anticipating a fairly swift turnaround for Taranaki this season. I'm not saying that all their problems are going to disappear overnight, but certainly the direction they're trying to take this is really good. And I guess we'll soon find out, because sooner or later, as the months go on, the Super Rugby will be over, and we'll be back right into another Mitre 10. So exciting times, and I couldn't be happier for Taranaki.
Be interesting.
And,
I was about to say, be interesting to see in terms of personnel, whether Barnes actually stays local, or if they've got enough money to look outside the union. I've already been told that Sean Wainui is moving from Taranaki to the Bay of Plenty Steamers, so that's right on the back of Selby Rickett. Manaki Selby Rickett also moving to the Bay of Plenty Steamers as well. So that's another issue. It's going to be he's always one of Taranaki's better players. Every time they take the field, so going to be very, very hard to replace. And of course, remembering they had that long-term injury to Tehorangi Walden last year, so there's your midfield right there, guys.
Yeah, if I know Neil, I think he'll stick to the local catchment, because again, it'll come down to systems and processes. They will look to make sure that the local feeder systems, the local clubs, are well looked after. But the reality is, if you want to be a top 4, top 2 NPC level side, you need to have players who are going to give you that X factor and be brought in that draft. So at the moment, Taranaki don't necessarily have many of them. So interesting times, but I think definitely the right direction, and we're probably going to see an immediate impact under this new coach.
Yeah, and Craig McMillan has said previously that Mitre 10 Cup success is closely correlated to the number of Super Rugby players you have. So they are going to need to breed some Super Rugby players from somewhere. Nocturnal writes, Bay of Plenty has a big population. They need to recruit so much. But his question is, Bay of Plenty is spending up big. Where is the cash coming from? You may have noticed that they've had a deal with China Lions. They've been one of the more progressive unions in that. Remember, they put a team into Global Rapid Rugby and have got an association with China, with the Chinese Rugby Union, about progressing the game up there. So maybe there's some cash coming in from that way. As I say, they've just been one of the more progressive unions. Stephen, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Paul, something that they will have to be a little bit careful about. Of course, it was a couple of seasons ago they took out the National Under-19 title, so there's some really good kids coming through in that team. One, for example, in Narawa, just forget his Mori Narawa, I think the winger who played for the Blues this year, or was in the Blues squad. Very, very good footballer. There's a few others, Kai Paul Brown, who was the captain of that team. They've just got to be a bit careful that they don't loot. It's all very well bringing these young guys through, but to keep them there, you need to feed them and make sure that they are going to get an opportunity in the future. And when you do start bringing players in from the outside, yeah, it's a very dangerous thing, but I can understand what Bay of Plenty Steamers are doing. They're a premiership team. They want to win the premiership title. They were a semi-finalist this year, and they've obviously looked at positions that they can improve on. And boy, that's a couple of good pickups. 2 New Zealand Māori players in Selby Rickett and also Wainui. Boy, that's got to add to what is already a strong Bay of Plenty Steamers squad.
And 2 players you're not going to lose to the All Blacks as well.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's whereas you look at things like when Tasman, picked up Sevu Reece, you're like, well, yeah, they're not going to see much of him. But you got to say, Bay of Plenty will see those players, having also picked up a Terry Black last year. Yeah, they, as you say, they're building up a very formidable team there in the Bay, and it'll be interesting to see because they'll have a new head coach this year with Clayton McMillan having moved on. I thought this would be a good point for me to show my interview with I've just gone absolutely blank. Xavier Rowe, who was an ex-Taranaki player and moved on to Waikato.
Here we are as the Chiefs get out in the community with First Windows and Doors. So thank you to their sponsors. And here I am with Xavier Rowe. So last year you've sort of moved provinces, went from Taranaki up to Waikato, and this year, hey, that's good performances there. Got you a Chiefs contract, so enjoying the professional lifestyle in Northern UKIP.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. Pre-season's been good. The boys came in pretty fit and healthy after a good Christmas, New Year's break, but it's good to be back up in Waikato, close to the home. But Taranaki was good, good learning experience, but yeah, happy to be back up in Waikato.
So how you find the difference in the level? I mean, being amongst the super guys, I mean, obviously you're training alongside players like Brad Webber, Triple T, your competition for the jersey this year, so 2 All Blacks there. So a step up, how are you finding that?
That's been good. I think the All Blacks came in this week, so it's obviously been a ramp up in intensity, and everyone's kind of a little bit on edge, so that's been good, but good things to start with anyway. Excited for the season.
And Clayton McMillan, obviously it's his first season here. How and a new coach for you, because he's obviously come from Bay of Plenty.
Yeah.
You think his style of play is going to be good for you, or how are you finding the kind of the drills and how he's putting things together?
Yeah, no, he's fit in pretty seamlessly. Obviously, I wasn't here last year, but he's been an awesome coach so far, and as like the other coaches, Roger Randall, Neil Barnes, and David Hill. So now they've all been pretty good, and yeah, it's looking good at the moment. Yeah.
So what are your goals? Obviously, I pointed out you're against 2 All Blacks for the jersey.
Yeah.
So what are your real goals for this year and the season? Obviously with Super Rugby and then Super Rugby Trans-Tasman, and then either All Blacks or Polynesian Rugby.
I don't know. I'm just taking one foot at a time kind of thing. I'm not getting ahead of myself too much. I just want to train well in pre-season. We've got a game of 3 halves next week, so hopefully I get a bit of game time there. But no massive goals at the moment, but yeah, hopefully aim for that 23 and the 23, that first game against the Highlanders on Friday.
So good luck with all that. It's been great watching your progress from through Waikato last season in particular, and yeah, good luck with the Chiefs this year.
Yeah, cheers, Paul. Appreciate it.
Great, thanks everybody, and don't forget to follow the New Zealand Sports Radio for more coverage of the Super Rugby and obviously Mitre 10 Cup later in the.
So there you go, guys. I was out at a Chiefs media day on Friday last week and did that interview. I've also got one coming up later in the show with Topu Vai as well. So any points off that one, guys, or shall we move on to Super Rugby AU and previewing that?
I think we can move right along. That's
move right along.
Well done, Paul. Very well done, Paul.
Yeah, thanks. It reminds me of ESPN. Fantastic work, Paul. Beautiful.
Oh, dearie me. So anyway, some stats here that, and perhaps I will have to zoom in on a few of them from, and I've just gone blank as to who they're from, but I will figure that out and get and give them the proper due kudos for this. But here we have the 5 different Super Rugby AU sides, and they've gone through picking who they think their match day 23 is, looking at the number of caps and the average age of the different sides. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I went through looking at the sides from a point of view as to how much turnover they had in each in their squads compared to last year. The Brumbies were the team that had the least changeover. Boa, I know you've been intrigued looking at these stats, but looking at the Brumbies, they're on the starting age of about just under 26, around just about 48 Super Rugby caps and 11 international. And 15 international caps average per player. Is that a good level for a starting 15 at Super Rugby?
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, I did some of my own calculations. I think, average age of 24, half 25 years with 40 plus Super Rugby caps and anywhere between 10, 11 plus test or representative caps. If you have a majority of your squad players who have that type of statistic or beyond, I think you're in very, 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 very good footing. And chances are you're going to have more stable combinations in your half sparings, in your hookers and jumpers, in your back rows, back three. So there's a very strong correlation to lesser player turnover year on year, and who goes on to win. And I think Brumbies have been, the flagship or the team who have been head and shoulders above, and this is a brilliant analysis of it. So I'm right into that line of thinking, and the scientific figures clearly show that there's empirical evidence to back that up.
Yeah, Nocturnal Right spots a bit of a hole there. He says that he looks at the light and experience at lock. He suggests, but Neville 73 caps there for Super Rugby, and Swain with 22. Yeah, but no international experience in their locking department could be a bit of an issue for them come the pointy end of the competition, maybe, or Super Rugby Super Rugby Trans-Tasman. Stephen, have you what are your thoughts on the Brumbies this year?
Yeah, they've always been quite solid at set piece time. We know how good they are close to the line. I'll tell you what, if you want to go and put a bit of money on the top try scorer, I'd be checking out what Whainga, the hooker, is paying at the TAB. But I also think they've had a little bit of a blow as well, because I did hear somewhere on the wires that the Brumbies winger, right now, his first name escapes me, is out for the season with an injury.
He is. That's. I mean, he had his name escapes me as well. He had a tremendous debut against the All Blacks and a really good introduction into Test. He's got some real good speed as well. So yeah, it is a bit of a blow. So not the greatest of start, but I guess it's something they'll have to do with. But I think they've just got enough cover. But yeah, we'll find out. Tom
Wright is the boy's name, and yeah, I have heard somewhere that he is pretty much out for most of the Super Rugby season, which is a shame.
Yeah, 23-year-old, 26 Super Rugby caps and 3 international caps. There we go, as we happen to have it on screen. But yeah, shame that Tom Wright is out for the for the season. That will give Muirhead probably a bit more game time than maybe he was expecting. Moving on to the Force, and if we compare that to the Brumbies, their starting 15 is slightly older and with quite a lot more international caps at 22, but slightly less Super Rugby experience. Overall, they are slightly they have slightly more Super Rugby, but I think part of their problem is going to be that they have had a lot of turnover. In this Force side, very few of them have actually played together, or quite a few of them have not played together. And Kabeli, Miotti will probably be their halfback partnership, who have played a lot together, but they'll be looking around at the rest of the team going, wow, they don't even speak my language. So it's going to be difficult for the cohesiveness and communication, I think, with this team, even though they have got some real good players. I mean, Godwin and Corandrani both played at the Brumbies together for a while, but that's been some time ago now. yeah, I'd say a few aging players, a few good players come in from the Jaguares, but it's going to be a matter of how quickly can they meld together. See you nodding away there, Stephen.
Yeah, and I think the other thing for them, I think when they've got their main 15 on the paddock, they're probably not a bad side. Obviously, you can probably see a leadership role somewhere in there for the veteran Jeremy Thrush. But yeah, you've sort of mentioned the age before 35 years old. Listen, he'll bring plenty of effort and enthusiasm, but when you do start getting those losses under your belt, interesting selection there is so they picked up an Argentinian boy, Miotti, Paul.
Oh, they picked up a few players from the Jaguares. So Cabelli, Miotti, Medrano in the front row as well. And I think there was a back as well who was also in there. They've also they did have the hookup, but unfortunately he's got himself a contract in the UK, I think with the Tigers, so he didn't come over. But yes, they've got some. I think it is 4 or 5 Jaguares players that have come over, which will be interesting for them as to how much they enjoy being in Perth. I guess it'll be a bit of a culture shock for them. Someone writes says Ralston is a sharp runner, so it'll be interesting to see how he goes on the wing there with just the 20-year-old with just 7 Super Rugby caps to his name. Obviously, also Rob Kearney, the Irish and British and Irish Lions player, 98 All Blacks caps, but 0 Super Rugby caps. But boy, oh boy, he'll be bringing some experience at fullback there for them. Yeah, look, a lot of international experience here, a lot of good players. The problem really is that it's a bit of a barbarian side, in all honesty. And they may actually be better during Super Rugby Tasman than they are during Super Rugby AU. With that,
and Paul, the reality is the style of play and the sheer amount of ball staying live in play at Super Rugby, because there is that large element of entertainment and barbarian style rugby. It is very much a younger sort of man's game. And when you hire some of these veterans, their playing minutes have to be really stage managed. And one of the stats I threw at you was the ideal Super Rugby player is somewhere around about the 24-25 mark, who has about 40 Super Rugby caps of experience. That's when they really mature and show their best form, according to the stats and data I have. So you're going to see, especially in Super Rugby Aotearoa, we will see more and more players. The bulk of them, the best of their playing days or the best of their form within the 5 New Zealand rugby franchises will probably be numbered around about 28, 29, and then they will have to probably go overseas. And this is going to force some of the younger players into the side. Now, the reason I said this, with guys like Xavier Rowe, give them a couple of seasons. Once they really start finding their footing in, with all that experience, and once they come closer into that ideal statistic, and when the older guys start leaving in, it is the perfect time they get to blood their whole experience as well as get more regular game time. And this is what has really worked well for within the New Zealand system. Now, unfortunately, the Australians, they take a slightly different view of the world. For example, getting most of the Jaguares players in. Yeah, sure, it's good from a high performance perspective for that respective franchise. But I'd be very concerned from the Wallabies high performance perspective, because all that is actually doing is depriving potential players who can be fast tracked into the Wallabies setup, valuable game time. So it's going to be very interesting to see how all this fans out.
It is obviously with the Force a bit different to all the other franchises. In fact, they have got Twiggy Forrester's cash behind them. By the way, all these stats are from Rugby Fixation. So at Rugby Fixation on Twitter, he's been good enough to let me screen grab his stats and show them on here. I have talked to him, and he said yes, go for it. So don't worry, folks. I'm not stealing other people's stuff without their permission. Talking about age and international experience, and boy, the Rebels are a different prospect to the Force, especially their pack. If you look at that pack, first choice pack has 20 international caps amongst them, 8 with Nazarani, 12 with Iliesi. All the rest of those guys have not played international rugby, and all of them, well, apart from Cummins at 28, all of them below 25 or under. That's a very young pack from the Rebels there, and the bench is no better. You look at the backs and you go, yeah, Powell, Tamua, Corabetti, Hodge, Dame Hewlett Petty. Admittedly, they got the NRL player Tony Upea. I'm sorry about the pronunciation there, but you're looking at that back line and you go, hey, Wallabies, look at that front, that pack, and you go, who are those guys? I mean, it's chalk and cheese, isn't it, Stephen?
It is. It's crazy. Gone through a lot of inexperience, but boy, they've also got a lot of class there as well, especially with Corabetti. We know what he can do. Tumua is a good playmaker. Powell is a halfback on the rise. The key will be trying to keep these experienced guys injury free. If they lose any of these experienced guys to injury, then they've got a bit of an issue. It's throwing a lot on a very young, what is basically a very young squad.
Boa, any thoughts on the Rebels?
Yeah, well, I'm actually quite flabbergasted because it's very unusual to have such a stacked sort of jacked lineup in your back division, and without having an experienced forward pack, you're actually gonna contest very well. But that's a hypothesis based on what we've seen in the past against some of the more experienced forward packs. So, I mean, is it going to be a case of having a star-studded back lineup who's going to be starved of possession and have nothing to do, or are they going to, have a different strategy where they're going to be relying on X factor all the time? So it's going to be very interesting to say. But based on what I'm seeing, I would expect the Rebels to struggle very much up front. And again, based on what's been discussed, Brumbies should, in theory, dominate this season's Super Rugby AU.
And guys, I was about to say, and one of our might have been Nocturnal Rights mentioned Trevor Hosea, who's an Australian rugby player of Cook Island descent, 2.03 meters, 115 kgs, only 21 years old. So I think he might be one to watch this year, guys. Very exciting talent.
Yeah, and right across the board, you can see the Polynesian influence on Australian rugby. It's very, very evident. So it's just it's going to be quite interesting to see whether we see more and more players from the Pacific Islands over the next 4 to 5 years make a real impact, and might come to a situation where the Wallabies first choice 23 on a game day will have more players of Polynesian descent than anything else.
Now, looking at the Reds, and if you go by Boa's stats of age and caps, they haven't got a chance with an average age of 23.4 in their starting lineup, with James O'Connor, the only 30-year-old. Everybody else is below 25. But McWright, Wright, Wilson, that back row really did impress last season. And Brad Thorne has been giving these guys a lot of game time. So you're looking at players like Wright, 23, but 45 caps. McWright, he might only be 21, but he's got 16 caps already. He's brought in through these young players, given them lots of caps, and perhaps more experienced than their age shows there, Bella.
Yeah, definitely. And that also shows, Brad Thorne's selection policy. If you're fit and if you do the work and if you're up to it, you're in. And that's something I respect in the guy a lot as a coach. And that's something we're starting to see more and more with Queensland and the Reds. And he's got a very good, extensive network of talent identification. So it's definitely for him, it's a long-term project. And definitely looking at those numbers, he has physically all the attributes and the right numbers to have more or less a squad which has a better chance than most based on age and experience.
I listen, if I had a few extra dollars to play with, they're my dark horses to take out this comp this year. I think they're ready to click. They showed glimpses of it last year. I can recall in the first part of Super Rugby before we went COVID. A really, really good performance against the Crusaders down in Christchurch, and I just think they're ready to click, and I think it's important that they click, because I think this is pretty much a make or break for Brad Thorn, guys. Would you agree?
Yeah, watch some of the some short snippets from the preseason against Waratahs, and I have to say they were awful. But the good news is, if you're going to make all those mistakes, you might as well do it preseason. But again, you're right. Once they roll on in, and preseason can always be, really odd. I remember many years ago. This was when it was Super 12. The Brumbies gave the Crusaders 116-point hiding in a preseason, and then Crusaders came back to actually win that season's title. So, preseasons can be deceptive, and if they're going to make mistakes, might as well do it. But yeah, look, Steve, I'm right with you, mate. They are certainly a dark horse, and who knows, they might be the long shot at odds.
Well,
Super Rugby AU.
Well, I'm kind of looking at their backline, guys. If you look at what their possible midfield, Paisami and Jordan Patea in the midfield, that's not bad, guys. That's going to be a Wallaby midfield. And if you look at their options in the outside backs, Dalgunu, Vunivalu, who's come across from rugby league, boy, they have got some excitement machines in those outside backs.
Yeah, absolutely. The Reds are clearly the second best team in this. They might be the youngest team. No, not quite actually. We'll get on to the Waratahs in a second. Wow. Look, they're a young team but an experienced team, because Brad Thorn has had a policy of youth, and it's his fourth season now with the Reds. So I get Stephen's point here. Look, how long can you be bringing young guys through before you actually start delivering? So if the Reds don't finish second this year in Super Rugby AU, at least you've got to say it's a failure for them after this. Especially when you look at what the Waratahs are pitching up with, because Michael Hooper's decided he's off to Japan for a while. And I talked about the fact that the Rebels looked like they had an inexperienced pack. You take out Jack Dempsey with 14 international caps, and boy, oh boy, this is one of the most inexperienced packs you'll see in Super Rugby. Bell with 3 caps, Horton naught. There's 1-0-0-1-0. I mean, that is that's not what you think of as from New South Wales, is it? New South Wales, Sydney, it's the home of rugby in Australia. It's supposed to have all the Wallabies, all the big names. And boy, oh boy, this is probably the least star-studded Waratahs side I can remember. But
no question about it. And I think this will be the Waratahs probably one of their worst seasons to come in waiting. And also again looking at this whole Super Rugby AU, and once they transition into the Super Rugby Trans-Tasman. I think, guys, look, it's going to be a bit of a lopsided affair once they come up against the New Zealand teams. But yeah, you're right. I think this Waratahs side, they will struggle tremendously. But I have to say they did all right against the Reds in the preseason. So we'll wait and see how that all pans out.
I was going to say that it might be a case with the Reds of the dress rehearsal not going so well, but it'll be a case of it'll be right on the night there. Just from the Waratahs point of view, a couple of players that I'd be very interested in the way they go is, of course, 2 players that we know pretty well, one from Auckland here, Jack Wetton, and of course Sam Caird, who had a stellar season for the Northland Taniwha. So it'll be interesting to see how these 2 guys fit into the mix. I just get a real suspicion that they're going to have a heavy workload in what could be a very, very tough season.
Right, of all the Super Rugby sides in Australia, the Waratahs going over to New Zealand to buy players in. You're like, seriously, guys, this is not what, from a Wallabies point of view, this is not what you want to be seeing. You want to see the Waratahs and the Reds basically being your production line of players, because those are the homes of rugby in Australia. Nocturnal Rights makes a point here that the future of the Wallabies depends on the Reds firing on all cylinders. Absolutely, it's got the future of the Reds. The future of the Wallabies is not there in Sydney. It's up there in Queensland and in Brisbane. And you got to say, there's obviously the odd player or 2, but Yeah, bringing players, especially the pack anyway. When you're bringing players in to strengthen up your pack, you got to say the Reds is where the pack is in the future for the Waratahs. So, boys, so in summation, guys, looking at all of this, then we are basically saying that the Brumbies and the Reds look good, decent. The Force are going to take a while to gel, and the Rebels and the Waratahs, well, they could do with some experience to help them out, couldn't they? It's a two-horse race, isn't it, for the title?
Yeah, but as the weeks wear on, I think Waratahs are going to look good for potential wooden spoon candidates. And the point I made earlier, this shows there's a bit of a disalignment between Rugby Australia high performance and what's going on with the contracting at Super Rugby level. So I would be very, very concerned. And Dave Rennie, knowing how how much into detail he goes, he'd be a worried man right about now. And looks like the Australian, some of these franchises are actually scraping the bottom of the barrel in their own backyard. And then best example is Jack Wetton going over there. And I was reading an interview about Jack Wetton about how he had very little options over here. And then he happened to know someone who was in the Waratah setup, and then he got a get out of jail card, quote unquote. So that doesn't make for great reading, but yeah, it's going to be interesting times for Wallabies and Super Rugby AU teams.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. Look, we have overrun tonight, but I've been enjoying the chat, so I've not tried to wrap things up quickly. I've just kept things going, and Boa's decided to bail quickly. So good night, Boa. So thank you, everyone, for sticking around for the full show, Stephen. We'll be back next week with rugby fixation stats for the Super Rugby Aotearoa franchises. Obviously, we will have my interview with Topu Vai, so last piece of breaking news here that Simon Hughes been there. Yeah, Toronto Arrows are going to be based in Atlanta. Yes, MLR is struggling to get ahead, but I think they're going to go. They are struggling to get ahead there. Last words, Stephen.
No, that's about it. Been an interesting week. We'll be interested to see how these teams bounce back in the Six Nations. But I'm pretty sure all those teams that maybe tasted defeat will be much better this weekend.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, as an Englishman, I'm hoping. Well, no, but thank God we've got Italy next, because at least I know we've got a win coming up. Have a wonderful week, folks. Don't forget you can join me at 7 a.m. every single morning for the morning sports briefing, where I'll keep you up to speed with all of the important sports news. And we'll be back next week on Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Have a great week, folks.